Hello, my name is Julia Tosti, and today I'll be discussing the experiment that was conducted where we examined the response of gummy bears in various solutions. So for the experiment, we had 3 different gummy bears. We had one which we used as a control, and then we also had one that we placed in a cup of distilled water, and a third that was placed in a saltwater solution. For the saltwater solution, we did oversaturate it with salt, so much so that the salt did not dissolve in the water. These 2 bears were then placed in their respective solutions and soaked over a period of 8 hours, and then after that period, we examined the response that they had from being in those different solutions over time. So this was the result of the experiment. A, as you can see, was just the control. It was straight out of the bag. B was the bear that was in the distilled water solution. As you can see, it was started to disintegrate on us a little bit. And then C, it was in the saturated saltwater solution. And it almost looks similar to the A solution, but we'll discuss these results on the next slide. So as I said, the A bear didn't change, obviously. The B bear, the one that was in distilled water, expanded immensely over the 8 hours. It was completely saturated from the water. The outer portion, I guess the sugary coating that's normally on gummy bears, was almost fully disintegrated, and it started losing its red color as well. And then the bear that was placed in the oversaturated salt water, it looked about the same size as the control, so it didn't really seem to lose much shape or change, like shrink or grow in any sense, but it did seem as though the outer sugar coating seemed to start to disintegrate. Although the size did not change, possibly over time it may have shrunk more, just due to the high concentration of salt that was present, which we will discuss why that is on the next slide. So the responses of these gummy bears was due to a process called osmosis. Osmosis is the process where water will move from a lower concentration from a lower concentration of solute to a higher concentration. It moves through a semi-permeable membrane, and it just tries to balance out the ratio of water and solute in the respective solutions. So if we look at it in terms of the gummy bears that we examined, the bear in the distilled water absorbed the water because it was placed in what's called a hypotonic solution. So the solution that was surrounding it had a lower concentration of solute, so the water moved into the bear in order to try to balance this out. So osmosis, I like to think of it as it sees where the water is needed, because if it's oversaturated with solute, it'll go to that spot. So it moves to the site that needs a greater source of water in order to make it even in terms of water and solute. Our blood cells actually do something similar, where it also uses the process of osmosis to balance out the surrounding solution as well as the solution that's in the blood cells. So for the bear in the salt water, although in our experiment it seemed unchanged with size, I believe that if it was in that solution any longer, possibly even overnight, it may have shrunk. This is because it was in what's called a hypertonic solution, where the surrounding solution had more solute than what was in the bear. So if we think about what's in the bear, we can think of the solute being probably the sugar, because there's a good amount of sugar in gummy bears, but there was a large amount of salt in the cup that the gummy bear was placed in. So much so that it was most likely more salt in the water than there was sugar in the gummy bear. So if it was soaked overnight, over multiple days, that gummy bear most likely would have shrunk because the water would have been moving out of the gummy bear into the water solution. So that was the experiment. The results, I believed, were what was expected. I did expect the water in the distilled water to expand the way it did, although I did expect the saltwater bear to shrink. So I was a little disappointed to see that it didn't shrink, but again, I think that if it did sit in that solution longer, that it most likely would have shrunk. But everything else seemed to stick within what was hypothesized prior to the experiment. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and thank you for listening.